And welcome everybody to the Coaches Parley, brought to you by Doaks Bulk Fuels and Caisse Financial Group, here and out as well. Thanks for joining us here Saturday night. We've got 4 out of the 5, little 4-on-4 hockey, little pond hockey, because it's kind of beautiful outside. The weather's melting. Just stay off the ice, kids. That's okay. We can come inside. We can watch a little hockey night tonight, and you can take a little break and watch us instead. Playing up top with me on the wing, Harry Mahesh. He's donning blue. He's no longer donning Philadelphia orange and Flyer orange and black. Playing on D is Sean Mullen. He's got a peculiar look on him, saying, why are we talking about blue? We'll get to that in about 30 seconds. And, of course, a man of many opinions, Mr. Mike Stackhouse. Starting with our first period topic, we have some incredible news to bring, some big news to the show. Earlier tweeted this week, coach and general manager of the Winnipeg Freeze, Mr. Harry Mahesh, joining us on Coaches Parlay. Congratulations, Harry.
Congratulations.
Yeah, this is big news. I found out this week, and really excited and anxious. I mean, this is something I've worked towards for a while, and yeah, I'm just really excited to get going with this team and bring on next year.
I was one of the first to know, and I had to keep it quiet until today. So I'm glad we were able to keep it a secret. Sean looks happy now. He's okay. He's in the loop now. He's happy.
That's great news. I'm really happy for you. A wonderful opportunity, and certainly to be a part of that pipeline too. I mean, the broader organization involved, it could lead to more opportunities down the road, assuming, as we would imagine that things go well for you there.
Yeah, I mean it's a well-oiled machine they got going there, and I'm just happy that they allowed me to join in.
Doesn't mean you get a big break. You got to start working pretty soon, Harry.
No, I got to head back to Manitoba and job start straight away. So I'm excited.
Mike's quiet. You want to say congratulations real quick, Mike, or no?
Yeah, I certainly off air said that already. Congratulations to Harry, and gotten to know him just through this show, and it's a good hire. I can tell just from my interactions briefly with Harry, he's going to do a good job there. I'm very confident that and I know we talk a lot about winning, and Harry wants to win a title, but in the event that you don't win a title, I can tell that you're going to have an impeccable organization with a team that's going to always be prepared, and an organization that can be proud that they've got a good person running their hockey operations.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You both coached and played in the Manitoba League. It's got to be exciting to climb that ladder up, right? And you go back to your experiences first on the ice, tying those skates, just hoping to make a team, then being a part of a staff, and now getting a chance to build your own organization. It's got to feel like full circle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of learning on the job, and it's one of those things where it wasn't too long ago that I still had those same butterflies those guys have. So I think the way I approach this, it's going to be, a lot of class and, the players first. We only do this to benefit the players. We do come second, and, it's great to advance your career, but you're not really climbing the ranks unless the people around you are climbing them with you. So it's going to be fun.
I'm going to ask Mike and Sean this question because they've dealt with a lot of more junior coaches than I have, and I've never worn the dual hat of coach and GM. Is that a similar role that's been done a lot in junior A hockey across the provinces?
From my experience, there was a ton of it. But, naturally, one thing about junior A, you have an opportunity to recruit and then manage the careers of those players that you're recruiting, right? So you're going out there, you're trying to sign those players, you're telling them where they fit in the organization, then you end up being the one that works with them on the ice and guides them. It's kind of a natural. But one thing I can tell you on top of that is, having interviewed many of those GMs and coaches who, are higher up that organization and more responsible for the PR that comes from it, we're going to get a lot fewer controversial statements from Harry. He's just going to clam right up here in the next little while.
Yeah, censorship right across the mouth, Harry?
I guess my experience with it is, Weyburn for years had Dwight McMillan coach, and Ron Rumble was a GM, and they won a lot of titles that way. Finances usually dictate that you have one guy wear both hats as opposed to trying to pay two guys to do it. But if you can have two guys do it, you're certainly at an advantage, because there are some days where the coach has to wear the GM hat or the GM has to wear the coach's hat, and the player doesn't always see the difference between the two roles when dealing with the one individual above them as the coach or the GM. So sometimes it's nice, like Yorkton, when they won titles in 14 and 15, they had Don Chesney as a GM, Trent Cassan was the head coach, and it went really well, just because of the two personalities involved, and one could play a certain role and the other guy could play the other role. But yet I've also seen, Humboldt, when they, won a lot of titles, back, I think in, 07, 08, 09, Dean Brockman did everything. And as a coach, he knew what he wanted on his team so that he could build his team and coach them the way that he wanted to coach them. So, if you can wear both hats, and if you can sort of keep everybody on board, or most of the guys on board, in a way that some days you got to be the GM, some days you got to be the coach, and you don't make too many enemies doing that, it can be very advantageous. But I think by and large in the junior A circle, that coach GM, that's very common, that you'll see that be done by the one guy.
I think maybe the most successful junior A team in recent history in Canada would have to be the Penticton Bees, as an example. And they have a guy who's not only coach and GM, also president of the hockey club. So it's not uncommon at all. I mean, I imagine, I don't want to speak for Harry, but I imagine you'll want to have an assistant coach that you can rely on, so that every once in a while you might have to take off on a recruiting trip or two during the season. That becomes extra important. I know when Mark Lamb was coach and GM of the Broncos, or Manny Vivros did that job the same way. Dean Brockman recently, in my experience covering that team in the Western League, it was the same thing. You had to have a top assistant that you could put on the bench so that you can go and do some of that GM work. That's a real key to being able to do both roles.
Yeah, I'm lucky that I have a good support staff. They're going to, with the Blues and the Ice, they do work together to help each other out. So, they're not just going to leave me high and dry. So for the first little bit, I'll definitely have a good support team around me. And then, it's up to me to kind of build around me. But no, you guys are all hockey guys, and this is something I've done my whole life. And I'm just excited to finally start down the path that I wanted, and, keep this job and keep it for as long as I can, move up the ranks. But Daryl Sutter's here now in Calgary. I don't think I can pick his brain before I leave. But there was a guy who did in the NHL, so I couldn't imagine how many times he had to change that hat day to day. And so, I'm just excited. So
let's you bring up Big Sutter. Isn't his family own the Red Deer Rebels still? Are they still a part of the WHL? No, they're no longer there.
Brent Sutter's coach there. Yeah,
they're still with Caisse. When I first heard the hire, I was like, wait a second, did I just see what I just saw? Considering Sutter is Mr. Hard-Nosed Hockey, is that what Calgary needs? Let's go a little off topic here for a couple minutes. Do you think they're going to buy into the Hard-Nosed Sutter campaign, or is this just a one half season and done thing for the Flames?
It's kind of the last card you can play. If you're the GM of that team, he knows he's gone through 4 coaches. So you've gone through, and then the last kind of, they always say the kick the can speech, you can use that only once a year. This is kind of his version of that. It's bring it in, see what happens. Obviously he's a good coach. He's won the Stanley Cup, and he actually took over a team and won the Stanley Cup. So, if there's anybody to do it mid-season, it's him. And I don't know if you saw, but this week he already skated him for 35 minutes, his first practice. Over. But you know what? Sometimes guys at that level, they don't mind that because they know what he's doing, right? Like he's got no reason to be mad at them, but it's kind of like we know what he's doing, and he's trying to. And yeah, I think sometimes it goes over well because, it doesn't matter how old you are. A good old bag skate brings you back to your roots, and it can sometimes snap you back into place. And it's not really a punishment. It's just more of a fun kind of team builder, more than anything sometimes.
You're going to bag skate the Freeze the first practice?
No. Teenagers hold a grudge.
Yeah. I sort of look at this, and I'm not a sports psychologist, but I tend to look at the psychology of it. And I go back to Mike Babcock when Toronto fired him. I pretty much knew that when Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander all got paid, those guys all knew that at that point the upper hand switched. right? Even though the coach was making a lot of money, they knew at that point when they've got 8, 9, 10-year contracts, they're going to outlast the coach. And if they don't want to play for him, they're not going to. So you could kind of see the writing on the wall there. So now in Calgary, it's almost like the opposite. It's like this is like they've got nothing to lose. This is a last-ditch attempt, and if it doesn't work, they're blowing this thing up. They're Gaudreau, Monahan, whoever, probably anybody but Tkachuk is going to be sent out the door if this doesn't go well. The players know that. So my guess is that for the short term, it is going to work, and they are going to play well because the players know, look, they've made a coaching change. They brought this guy in. We better smarten up, or he's going to make our life miserable because he's not going anywhere. They just brought him in. There's no way they're just bringing him in and they're going to get rid of him in 2 weeks. So either you toe the line, or it's going to be pretty miserable for you from now until the end of May or whenever the season's over.
Sometimes there's this odd. I mean, the Sutters are hard-nosed guys. They favor hard work, et cetera, et cetera. But there's this sentiment that Daryl Sutter is a yesterday guy. He was having success in the NHL pretty recently. I mean, he was just in LA 2016-17. He's coached parts of 18 seasons in the NHL and missed the playoffs 3 times. Won 2 cups in the last 10 years. Made 3 finals as a head coach. Multiple times made the 3rd round. And he's known to be one of the best systems coaches in the league as well. And, a guy who lives and breathes hockey and learns and develops and changes with the flow of the game. He's not charismatic. He's not gregarious. So there's a sentiment that automatically that means that, that's what he is, hard-nosed, and that's all. But I think this guy really knows the game. And it's not just a matter of coming in there like a bulldog and whipping these guys. He's going to teach as well. And he's been successful everywhere he's been. And he's never had a stint on a team that was a complete failure, especially in recent history. And LA was his best run. So he deserves another opportunity. I don't think this is a Hail Mary. I think any team would be foolish not to have considered Daryl Sutter as a possibility if he was available and willing to coach again. He'd retired a couple of years ago. So the fact that he's coming back, I think, is a great boon to a Calgary team that will likely overachieve given their mediocre roster.
And I'm going to go one step further on that. I think the media paints Daryl Sutter in a particular way, but the limited contacts I have indicate players absolutely love this guy. He is he's one of those guys that I guess he can be hard to play for, but if you do your job, players love him. Like, and he actually has quite a personality. He just never shows it to the media, but behind the closed doors with the players, he actually is quite a character from what I've been told. And so I think this has the potential for now to go very well.
I've had the experience personally in a couple situations where the guy the media thinks is the real friendly, awesome guy next door you'd have a beer with is the opposite, but he's just really good at handling the media. And the guy who's kind of uncomfortable with the media is actually the guy you'd want to have a beer with. So be careful what assumptions you make because of his, the expression on his face on the bench. He's a great coach. He's had a great run. And if he hadn't been retired, I'm sure he'd have had another job before this.
You're absolutely right. Real quick around the horn, does Calgary make the playoffs, Harry? Yes or no?
No.
Mike?
No.
Sean?
Yeah, I don't think so either. What I think happens is maybe the worst case scenario for a team that needs to be blown up, that he has them overachieving close enough to the playoffs where it's maybe enough that they don't. And that's the long history of the Calgary Flames. Hang around the middle of the pack and never actually commit to anything.
I think I think that probably I'm going to agree again with Sean on this. The only thing I'll add to that is shortly after the regular season ends, my guess is he's also the general manager, and they do blow it up.
Well, it remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. All I remember is when I had both hats on for a short couple of summer trips, I had a 24-hour rule that you couldn't approach the coach after a terrible game, but I was still the GM, so I took all the flack nonetheless. So I was kind of hooped either way, no matter what hat I wore. Let's go to the break. We'll come back in the second period. I'm sure Sean and Mike and Harry will have lots to tell me about the WHL and some of their predictions with the East Bubble starting up this weekend as well. We'll be right back here on Coach's Parlay. Took a bit of a tangent there in the first period, but we had to discuss things because, quite frankly, Harry needs all the help he can get. No, I'm just kidding. He knows what he's doing. He's got good support. And hey, he's always got the three of us to, lend a helping hand or a shoulder to cry on if he needs. Because you're going to be back in Manitoba. Your fiance is going to be in BC, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And is she going to the Olympics this year or no?
Yeah. I mean.
So she'll be gone, and she's got other things going on in the world.
Just busy.
Busy. We'll leave it at that. Speaking of busy, Regina's going to be hopping. It's already hopping already. They got 7 teams in one city. They've got them all figured out, the university. They got different floors. They got skip the dishes. They got all their PS4s, their Xboxes, comedy nights, whatever you have it. Before we get to the East Bubble in Regina, what have we seen so far in the first couple of weeks in Alberta of the WHL play that we like about what's happening in that Alberta division? Let's start with you, Sean.
Well, the Edmonton Oil Kings are an absolute force so far. Outscored their opponents 21-6 in 4 games. They've got 18 guys on the roster who have points already. And they already were a team that was showing signs of really coming together before everything went south last year. And they did a great job after being on top for quite a long run, couple of championships, a Memorial Cup. They rebuilt with a lot of skill and speed, and that roster is loaded with depth right now. And they look like, it's so early, but they look like the class of the division. And that's the story in the early going. Everyone else is kind of hovering around the middle. I mean, Lethbridge has only played 2 and lost 2 badly. So the Hurricanes, who knows what they'll be. Not a good start. Edmonton looks like the team to watch in that division. And a team that's developed a lot of NHL draft picks, probably going to have a lot of scouts watching their games on video.
Mike, what do you think? Someone going to challenge Edmonton there, or we have them as the cherry and everyone's sitting below?
Yeah, again, I gotta agree with Sean. I think it was eye-popping for me the first couple of games. I was like, whoa, like they're on fire. Certainly looks like, as I watch some of the highlights online and whatnot, even though it doesn't, I don't think we're going to have playoffs, or I don't really know what's happening there, but that hasn't stopped the games from being competitive. And I know one of the things I heard in the SJHL before they were shut down, and I'm seeing it in the Western League games, the brief amounts I've watched, is that the intensity's there. These kids are hungry to play, and Edmonton does look like the class, but I would also say that there's no shortage of effort there at all, and that's great to see, because I wasn't sure. I've heard even the pros will tell you that sometimes it's hard to just get that extra bit of gas when there's no crowd in the building. You're lacking a little bit of energy with the atmosphere. And, from what I've seen so far, if that emptiness of the arena is bothering the players, it sure doesn't look like it. And that's probably the one thing that strikes me, is that, yeah, Edmonton's a class. Everybody else is kind of there. But, the other thing for me, it's going to be like the NHL, where I'm watching the Canadian division and I'm not watching a heck of a whole lot of anything else. I'm going to end up watching the Regina stuff, and I'm going to not really pay attention to these other divisions. So I've got 4 or 5 games of the Alberta division, and then all of a sudden the Regina bubble's going to start, and that's probably all I'm going to pay attention to. And I'm looking forward to see what goes on there. And again, not so much who are the best teams and things like that. I'm looking at Connor Bedard. How does he play out of the chute? I'm looking at Swift Current because I felt that total 100% tear down there? And are they going to take, at least a step forward, under Dean Brockman? I know what kind of a quality person Dean Brockman is. I know what he's capable of doing, but he's never done it in the Western League really before. So I want to see if they can, take that step forward. I know Prince Albert should be pretty good. Saskatoon, like Brandon, we're probably not going to see the impact of the change of ownership, because it's still basically the team that it was, before Kelly sold it. So I think we're probably a year out on seeing what happens with them. So really Regina and Swift Current are the two teams for me that, are they going to be good? I don't know, but I'm watching to see what happens with both of those.
Harry, being in Alberta, what have you seen or what have you heard in the communities, and what have you liked so far if you've been able to catch any of the games?
Well, I've seen some of the highlights and some of it through social media, and it just kind of feels like you see the pictures and everything being sent out there in the highlights, and it's just kind of an overall morale boost. Like you can just see it kind of feels like normal. Yeah, we haven't had hockey for this entire time, but I mean, March is usually when hockey is at its most intense, leading the playoffs. And like the other guy said, like it looks good. I mean, I think the interesting thing is you saw the guys who were supposed to be, the highly touted, NHL picks, they're all doing well right now. Like there isn't, you're still hearing those familiar names. And I know Edmonton's got a couple of guys, Dylan, there's a Gauthier there. Like he's supposed to be a top 5 pick and he's lighting it up. So I think it's just really nice to see that, there was this kind of impression that these kids might take a step back, which, maybe it did a little bit, but you're still seeing kind of the cream at the top. Nobody's drastically fallen off yet that I've seen so far in Alberta. But guys look good. So obviously these guys have been skating and, taking it seriously. So I think if you're a scout for these NHL teams, it's really beneficial that these guys are back and playing, because you really are starting to kind of sift through that first round. And I think later on in the rounds, it's going to get a little bit more tricky, but guys are playing well and it's going to be interesting to see. And I actually am really happy that these players, like Mike said, came back with this kind of intensity, because it goes to show that, we didn't lose that interest that we thought might happen, or, players didn't necessarily fall by the wayside. So I'm just happy that the guys that, you heard going into this year are still the guys making an impression, and they weren't too badly negative affected.
I'll say,
sorry, real quick before you get Sean, let's get right into that bubble. Unless you want to add something to what Harry said.
No, I was just going to follow up on Brockman and the Swift Current situation. I mean, that was where I was most recently and where I live. I would say Mike is right. Dean's had great success in the SJ. I think his run in Saskatoon was a little underrated. If you look at the 1 year to the next development of the team, and they actually won 7 more games from 1 year to the next, and would have been in a playoff spot if not for a really goofy divisional setup that robbed them of a spot and had a far inferior team get in the playoffs, despite the fact they traded their best forward and best defenseman away at the trade deadline. So I think he did a really good job there. And Swift Current was an impossible situation. There's not a coach alive that would have gone into the Broncos situation after that Memorial Cup and had any success. They traded everything that wasn't nailed down. It was 7 years of first-round picks in a row when you looked at the players, the past players who were first-round picks and the future first-round picks. It was just an absolute yard sale of everything they had to win a Memorial Cup or win a Western Hockey League championship that year. So he's done as well as he could do with the assets that were available. Will they be better this year? I don't know if they're measured by being better. I think they, like Regina and Moose Jaw to a degree, and a lot of the teams are coming in this year with this bubble and are coming in to say, okay, well, no one's winning a championship probably. What we need to do is see what we have. So Swift and some other teams I've seen have gone very young to see what these guys are. Give them a chance to play in this 24-game run, see how far they've come because they haven't had a chance to play for most of this year, and then figure out what holes they have moving forward. What does our depth chart look like? Because otherwise you'd have absolutely no clue. So this is a real evaluation tool. And Regina, Swift Current, Moose Jaw are all in the middle of rebuilds. And so these are going to be really important evaluation games to see how good are the young guys that we have spent all this time drafting. Do we have enough? And if not, what's next?
I'm glad I didn't cut you off there, Sean, because you brought up a very valuable point. Looking at this as a benefit for a team perspective versus a player benefit. I mean, obviously the players are happy to be back on the ice, but like you mentioned, something I never thought of actually tonight, teams are using this as an evaluation for the next 2 to 4 years, maybe 5 years down the road, building their depth charts. Last year, correct me if I'm wrong, PA was in the first spot. Winnipeg and Brandon were sitting 2 and 3, pretty close together. I think they were 1 point separating. Does that matter at all when it comes to this 24-game schedule for the East Division? And if it doesn't, then is the benefit more for the individual player, or like you said, the team looking at their depth chart and seeing how they're able to plug and play for that next year when a Memorial Cup and a WHL championship should be awarded?
Well, I'll just say both. I think the teams are looking to set themselves up and evaluate what they've got for September, almost a weird training camp, if you will, and but it's also for the develop, and the players know. So that's where the intensity comes in. It's not, let's have an exhibition schedule and play out a string. The players are playing for their future livelihoods or their future spots on these teams. The teams are evaluating to, as what Sean said, well, what do we have going forward? And if we don't have what we thought we had, how do we get it, or what do we do to go from here? So I think both, and it is unique, and I hope we never see anything like it again.
Sean, you want to chime in?
Yeah, for me, it's all those things. From a team perspective, why was it so important to get back? I've had that question asked to me a number of times around town, because they're like, they're not going to make money, and they're going to lose money by having this happen. There's not going to be a playoff. There's not going to be, why is it so important? Well, one, we talked about the importance of making sure there was a chance for the players to play, so they don't start looking elsewhere like Europe and the US. So they had to give them something. Two, it's important for these players to play from an organizational standpoint, but just for the players. If you care about the players, you care about hockey, these guys haven't had a chance to play and develop. So that's important. Three, you have to see what you got. And normally with your young guys, you would have had full midget seasons to have looked at and seen, how are these guys coming along? What role were they playing? Where were they at the start of the year? Where were they in the middle? Where were they at the end? What are areas of their games that are improving and not? Now, maybe they've been skating and scrimmaging, but they haven't really been playing. So how do you know what your roster looks like, what your depth chart looks like? I mean, if you try to go into next September with nothing to base it on, then you're absolutely blind going into training camp. Normally, these guys have maybe 5 spots or so to fill at a training camp. Otherwise, they kind of have their roster penciled in. Next year, if you hadn't had these games, you'd have had a lot of empty spots on those rosters and some huge training camps with a lot of confused people. So they needed this desperately to get any sense of what's going forward on those teams. Do you want to win these games? You always want to win. And the players need to compete, not only the older ones because they have their future on the line, but the younger guys to show where they belong. And the teams need to know what the future is going to be.
Harry, I want to ask you this question. What does it do in terms of a commitment for a player from the team looking forward, saying we're going to play these 24 games, and if you're one of these players that's not aging out, we want you to stick around? What does that mean for the player from the team?
I mean, that's obviously, they're making a commitment. I mean, it's no small feat to get invited to one of these teams during the bubble. I mean, obviously they see you as somebody who can help, not only in the short term, but they want to evaluate you. And there's no better way to get scouted by a team than to wear their jersey. And so I think, it's nothing to, take lightly. They invite you, there's a lot of money and a lot of work that goes on to putting this whole thing together. So I think you take a lot of pride in it. I know we've had guys, with my time from the Flyers who are in this bubble now, and they're just excited. I mean, I would love this opportunity. I know it's 2 months to, you're isolated again, and it feels like we're all trying to get out of that kind of world. But you know what? For the guys who get to kind of do this, it's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, hopefully. And even for the kids, I think this was not ideal, but this is something they can kind of take away. And in 10, 20 years from now, say, I played hockey inside the COVID bubble in the Western League, and I was in this room, and you're rubbing shoulders with your coach and your GM and your scouts every day. Even that FaceTime, I think for a coach is really important. You get to evaluate the character of a guy. They're in a dorm room down the hall for 2 months. So, you're going to learn a lot about that kid's character in the short term, which I think is something that is the hardest thing to scout, right? If you're in Prince Albert and you're scouting a kid out in BC, you can watch them, but you can't really get that day-to-day feel of the guy. So if you're a kid, you're going to be walking with, your hair done and your nice shirt, polo every day for 2 months. And, sometimes that can earn you a spot on a team. It leaves an impression on a coach or a GM or a scout that can be around you. So like the guy said, this is really good to kind of help make sure that in September, everything is back to normal and teams have had this experience and, back on track.
I think for them, what do young guys do these days? They that play hockey. They play a lot of video games. They play hockey. They text with their buddies. I think they'll be okay more than the adults, because this is. And if you play hockey in Swift Current, you're kind of in a hockey bubble anyway. You hang out with your teammates at the billets houses and you play video games and you go to the rink, right? And they've been dying to play. So I think they'll be okay. As an adult, being locked in a bubble like that might drive me a bit nuts, but I think they'll be fine. I think they'll find things to do.
I think that's a great way to end the period off, guys. Gentlemen, great discussion. I think isolation will take a back seat when it comes to actually getting on the ice and looking forward to game days. Those will start up here. I think before we go to break, who wins the bubble in the East? Can you give me one for sure, or one potential leader of the pack, each one of you? I mean, I'm going to be the homer. I'm going to take the ice, only because Peyton Krebs gets to play 24 games. Hopefully he doesn't go back and forth, because if he does that, he's got to go back into a quarantine in the A. But I really like how Winnipeg was playing last year, and they have a majority of those players back. I also, like you said, Connor Bedard, I want to see how little Connor Geekie plays. I mean, he is a kid, tremendous potential, a great kid, growing up a little bit. He's got a bit more size to him compared to last year. He's not the little kid, but I'd like to see how he takes advantage of this bubble as well. Harry, any particular team you like out of the East bubble?
I got to go with the ice,
Okay.
Of course you do.
That'd be like hanging like this real quick. If you did something else, 2 days in, you're done, Harry.
Yeah. But same reasons you said. I mean, I think they got something there, and see how it goes.
Yeah. Sean?
Well, yeah. The natural is Winnipeg, because they were already ahead of the curve that we thought they would be at last year in their development, and they have a lot of their roster back. So I would feel good about them. I'd say another team to not underestimate is the Raiders, coming off, yes, a championship 2 years ago, so a lot of those guys are gone, but still a lot of pieces that were a part of that are there. They know how to play Mark Habscheid's brand of hockey, and in a short season, a team that's had the most success in the last 2 years, in a position to really take advantage of some other teams trying to find chemistry.
And Mike, last one to you.
I have no idea. I'm going to go totally off the board and say, wouldn't it be just typical for Saskatoon to do well in a situation where they can't generate any excitement in their city about their hockey team?
Well, there you have it. Melancholy Mike calls out the Saskatoon Blades. We'll leave it at that. Third period action coming up. Something we haven't discussed at all, but it's an annual discussion that comes up in the hockey world. Stay with us here on Coach's Parley. Back here with the final frame of the third period. We're going to talk about something different. Mike, I'm going to start with you, because off camera you said you had a interesting approach to how points are awarded, win, loss, tie, OTL, which is where we're going to. This conversation comes up in amongst International Ice Hockey Federation. Will it ever come to the NHL? Probably not. But the changing of the point system. Mike, give us your rundown on this, and then we'll see how the rest of this conversation develops in our third period.
I love these kinds of discussions because as I watch curling for the last couple of weeks, curling is the one sport that has embraced changing their game to appeal to a wider section of fans, and they're not afraid to experiment with rules. For whatever reason, a lot of the other sports, baseball being the worst, and then hockey probably next in line after that, they don't really like to play with tradition a whole lot. And when we talk about improving the game, what's the one thing that people like to see? They like to see offense. And as I watch the NHL, I noticed this a lot in the bubble last year, and I'm seeing it again this year throughout the regular season. More and more goals are as a result of, deflections in front of the net or a ping pong shot. And it's just that's how we're seeing a lot of the goals being scored. So I'm not so much in favor of the, 3 points for a regulation win and 2 points for an overtime win. I'm more of the thought you get 2 points for a win, and if you score 4 goals, you get another point. And if you lose and you get 4 goals, you get a point. And that would give you some incentive. So if you're out of the game early, like Winnipeg was the other night when they lost 7-1 to Montreal, and they just skated around for a period and a half because the game was already over. If you get to 4 goals, you still get a standings point. Now, coaches will never go for that. I said I've talked to coaches about this. I've talked to a couple coaches. I said, do you like that? No, hate it. And I know why they hate it, because it makes it harder to play. Like coaches coach to win. They don't coach for excitement for the fans. They coach to win. And that's why I always say, if you're going to have these committees to improve games, coaches and general managers should have absolutely nothing to do with it, because they don't want the game to be better. They want to win. I don't blame them. I would too. So I'm not a coach or a general manager. I want to see fun. And for me, fun is offense, no matter what the sport is. And so that's how I see, things maybe necessarily, and it would really open things up in hockey. And I would even go so far as to say that, if you get 1 point for 4 goals, you get 2 points if you get 6. And I think you'd see the game would be coached and played a lot differently. I've done some homework on it. I've looked at some standings where it's like, okay, what if you did 3 points for a regular season win, 2 points for an overtime win, or what have you? And by and large, most of the time, the standings wouldn't be any different than they are now.
It would just make the game more exciting, you're saying?
No, I don't. Like if we just did the regulation win points and the overtime win, I'm not really actually in favor of that, because I don't think it would change anything. It would just make it more complicated. Now, what I'm proposing isn't necessarily simple, but I think when you dangle that carrot, when you say, look, you score 4 goals, you're going to get a point in the standings whether you win or not. But let's face it, if you're playing to get 4 goals, chances are you're going to win. So that's how I would do things to try and improve the game, because I like offense and I want to see it open up, and I want to see great plays, especially in this day and age where we seem to be taking the physical part out of the game. So if we're going to take that out, then I want to see goals. And I know goalies don't like it, and coaches certainly aren't going to like it. But I'm curious to see what the game would look like if you dangled that incentive for offense. If you said, okay, you're going to get 2 points for a win, but you're going to get more points depending on the number of goals you score per night.
Should we go to the coach GM, or should we go to Sean? Who wants to go first? Because I think Harry's just ripping at it.
It's funny, the second you said coaches didn't like that, the gears are spinning, and I'm going, well, if I'm down by 4, then I'm just going to send 3 guys on the blue line. Who cares if we give up 10? We just got to hit 4, and now that game is, it's just like a ping pong match to try to get to 4. But I like the creativity, but it scrambled my brains because I could just see the anxiety of looking up and knowing we're up by 4. And that team's going to send a cherry picker, and now they don't care whether they lose by 10. They just want to get the 4, so they're going to be guns a blazing. So it would change a lot. I think coaches would have to throw all their books out the window. But I mean, getting to 4 goals is as tough as it is. So I mean, it's funny we add these tweaks to the game, and we think it's going to change it a lot. But it's like you kind of forget, like the helmet stickers, right? Once it's there, it just tends to kind of be forgotten. But going back to the 3-point system, it's funny in sports. It's like the points don't really matter until there's 10 games left. You lose 3 games in October, and it's like, well, those 2 points are gone. So I don't think you get the 3 points for the win, 2 for overtime, 1 for losing in overtime. I don't think it would change the game at all until the last month, because coaches and players, they don't even look at those 2 points as even counting the same. It's like the ones in April count more than the ones in October. So you'd see the game change where, okay, we're so many points out, there's 6 games remaining, now we got to go for it. But in the first game of the year, whether you get 3 points or you get 2 points, I don't see a coach really changing up the tactics in a 2-2 game in 5 minutes left to get that extra point. I think they would just play it as it is, and if they score, great. If they go to overtime, get 2. You see a lot of coaches lose in overtime and shootout, and they get the 1 point, and they're almost still just sigh of relief, like, we got 1, okay, So I don't think it would drastically change the game. Everybody thinks you'd be eager to get that 3rd point, but it just doesn't happen in hockey. No coach is going to forget everything they've learned to try to cater for the extra point. They just say, play the game, guys. If we win, we win. I do like it. I think it would, it would kind of clean it up a little bit, but I don't think it would create any drastic change in the way the game is played until the final 2 weeks of the year.
Sean?
So my thoughts on the 3-point system are not really about how it would alter the game. They're about fairness. And I have looked at the standings before. There are times it would change them. There are times that it wouldn't drastically. But ultimately, to me, if you're a team that gets the job done in regulation, then 1, you deserve to have a better result than the team that won in a 3-on-3 or in a shootout. That's just the reality to me. 2, every game should be worth the same. So we're playing all these games, and down the stretch, you won in regulation, you got the job done, and you're fighting with these other 2 teams that you're battling with, and they keep exchanging 3-point games, making it harder for you to secure your spot. Why would a game be worth more than another game? And then some will suggest the 2 points to 0 no matter what. I'm not comfortable with a shootout or 3-on-3 hockey deciding 2 or 0. So for me, if you win in regulation, you deserve to have the 3 points, and you get to overtime, it's a battle for the extra one. And every game's worth the same, and it's just a fairer system, regardless of how it impacts the actual games themselves. 2, and I think this is probably a controversial opinion, I'm not of the mind that automatically more scoring equals more entertainment in the game. I've watched, we have glorified the 80s quite a lot because there were outstanding players and there were some high-scoring games. If you try to watch those games now, they're unwatchable in comparison to the hockey that we watch these days. Like, they're scoring from everywhere. Shots that now you'd want your goalie run out of town if that came anywhere near your net. They're not as fast. They're not as skilled. They don't have the same level of jam. I mean, there's more fighting and hitting and stick work, but like the battles in the corners weren't as intense. Players are stronger, faster, more creative than they've ever been. And it's harder to score now because they're better, because their commitment to defense is stronger, because they're working on systems more, because the goalies are better, because they battle harder for every inch they get, because you have to make your decision faster. Hockey's the best game in the world. I'd love to see a little more room for creativity. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't want to see 8-7 games. I've watched lacrosse. I love it as a sport, but when a goal is scored in lacrosse and a team wins, 13-7 or 8-6, it doesn't have the same level of excitement. When it's almost getting to the point of basketball where, there's a basket, okay, and I don't wake me up when there's 5 minutes left. Whereas in hockey, you score a goal, every goal has major ramifications. I love watching 2-1, 3-2 games. I love them. So if I have to have more 2-1, 3-2 games or more 7-6 games, I'll take the 3-2 game. That's my opinion. That doesn't mean that I like clutching and grabbing or that I like that goals have to be deflection goals. I'd love to see more of the skill plays pay off because we have so much skill in the game. So there should be ways to work with the teams to, open things up somehow. I'm not sure the exact solution to that. But that doesn't mean I want it to go back to 8-6. I don't think I'd enjoy that. And my beef with the system that Mike proposes is that it really is a show me point rather than has anything to do with competitiveness. To me, ultimately I want the system designed to reward the best teams. And that is a little more gimmicky. I want the point system to be the fairest way to reward the most successful teams.
So I was a part of a league. I mean, they implemented this after I was done down in Carolina, and they experimented with starting every game with a shootout. And then whoever won that, there was no overtime. The incentive was already there. So the goalies were, you're telling me I got to start the game with 3 breakaways? I mean, it didn't last very long, but that was something that some owner created. Say, let's just start. The tie's already decided. If it's 3-3, whatever, boom, right? So if you lose that shootout, you're already thinking you're down 1. I mean, like I said, it didn't last very long, but that was something somebody thought of. But like Sean said, as a coach, I would rather win 2-1 than 8-7. And some people would be like, yeah, but you scored 8. But every coach would be thinking, yeah, but I let in 7. And that's just how the mind works on this side of the bench. So, yeah. I mean, I'm all for it. Like, don't get me wrong. There's nights where it is a barn burner and you're going back and forth. But if it's every weekend, it's, that could get old too. If you had a couple of years of 6-7 games, people would be saying, oh, I missed the big saves. I missed the tight checking. I mean, people are never happy. You get too much of one thing, they're going to flip their mind. So I don't think it's necessarily broken. You see unreal plays, and then guys just don't score. The goalie makes a good save, So you're still seeing the moves and the creativity. It's not very often that you're going to get a good move followed by a nice goal every time. But you're seeing the balance of both, and I think the games are. I mean, they're entertaining. Players are good, and every time you get better at scoring, people are just going to get better at defending, and it's that balance back and forth.
I really liked the 4-3 Toronto-Winnipeg game the other night. I thought that was awesome. I mean, Toronto carried the play and they had the better chances, but that was great goaltending. I mean, the Appleton goal was fantastic. The pass from behind the net from Ehlers was great. So, I mean, yeah, I don't want to see necessarily 8-6 games either. I'm just curious. I feel like, if you say raced to get to 4, then I think you might see, as opposed to cherry pickers, you might actually see them tighten it up defensively. Okay, you know what? We got our 4 and we want to make sure we get the win, as opposed to, hey, we got 4 and these guys are going to cherry pick. I think, you might, hard to know, but I know like for me, I know that, right. And as Harry's just said, I prefer to win the 2-1 game. Well, that means you're playing those strict defensive systems. You want to have good goaltending, and the other team will make a mistake and will get a goal. When you get to the NHL, all the teams are so good that you don't see many mistakes. And, I go back to curling, and maybe it's not necessarily fair to say, but part of the reason why I like the women's game so much is that there's still those mistakes. And that's why I love junior A hockey. There's still those mistakes, and that for me is what makes the game enjoyable. Is that, and Harry will probably tell you, almost every goal is scored because somebody somewhere made a mistake. Yeah, you got a great play was made, but there was a mistake somewhere. And when you get to the NHL, and Sean's right. I mean, the players are so good, they're so fast, the systems are impeccable, and the players follow them to a T. Well, yes, and because of that. That's why I want to take the board and just tip it right over and say, there, now you got to do a whole bunch of new systems because you're too good at what you're doing.
No, I really like what Sean said about valuing the 60-minute win. I think that has to be the be-all. Like, that's how the game was originally started, played. And I'm a traditional guy. I mean, if you win a game in 60 minutes, you should deserve to get 3 points as opposed to winning it in 65 or 65 plus a shootout. I mean, we see the column added OTLs. Why aren't we seeing, and we see the column RTWs, regular time wins. The regular time wins should be valued most. Am I wrong on that, guys?
And I think the other thing is you'll get those who say, well, if the tradition is regulation win, then go back to that system and scrap the 3-on-3 and scrap the shootouts. I'm not against those things either. I think they bring excitement to the game. I think it's good in the regular season to always have a winner. I think fans enjoyed that. So I wouldn't suggest taking that away as some would. Again, if you win a game 5-2 in regulation versus a team that barely scraped by to overtime and won a shootout, I feel like there's a different value to those wins. And it just messes with my head to see some games worth more than others. And there's no other sport, I don't think, that I can think of where one game has more points assigned to it than another game does. In baseball, if you win extra innings or not, it's the same value to your standings. Somehow in hockey, we've justified for so long that the game that goes to overtime gets the two teams an extra point. That doesn't make sense to me.
I'm on board with that.
Yeah, same here. I'd like to see the 3-on-3 be 10 minutes. Personally, there's tweaks there. That's still the most. I'm not gonna lie. Every game I watch that isn't, the team I'm rooting for, I watch every game hoping it goes to overtime. That's just, if it's a close game, I'm on NHL Network and I'm looking to see how much time's left. Oh, close game, I go right to that one, and I'm just waiting for the overtime. I think it's just natural. You're going to find that exciting. Unless you're watching Montreal play, they're the only team that seems to dumb it down a little bit too much. But
stop picking on the Habs. Come on.
It's still fun. You can be in hockey your whole life. They always say as soon as there's a fight, 3-on-3 overtime, the crowd's into it. It doesn't matter what your opinion is of the game. It gets people going.
And Winnipeg has kind of upset the game board there too by going with 3 forwards. They're playing 3 forwards in their 3-on-3, which teams, and it's worked. So we're a copycat world. So I don't watch too many games that don't involve Winnipeg, but I'm sure that other teams have, it's crept in and they're doing it. Remember when Patrick Waugh was coaching Colorado, he used to pull his goalie with 4 minutes left. Everyone thought he was crazy.
4 minutes,
how many
by
games,
6.5.
Right. And how many games did he win doing that? So now it's almost routine. A team, used to be a team was down by 1 goal. And then as soon as there's 1 minute left in the third period, the goalie comes out. Well, now it's minute 45. Right. And I thought, Patrick described it very well when he said, well, sometimes it takes almost a minute just to get set up, and then you don't have any time left. So if you're going to pull the goalie, you may as well treat it like a true power play and take your chances with it. So those are some of the things that have evolved almost, naturally, just through innovation, through coaches, right, with the 3-on-3 and with the pulling of the goalie. So some of that does happen on its own. But yeah, you wouldn't get any argument from me with Sean's idea on why is there all of a sudden 3 points up for grabs in an overtime game and only 2 points for the team that wins in regulation. I think it's a fair comment.
And overtime, I have to admit, I was wrong about 3-on-3 overtime. I'd watched it in the BCHL when I was the broadcaster in Trail, and I didn't love it there. And maybe it was just because the speed wasn't quite at that level, what it is in the NHL, because I just found it slow developing 2-on-1s back and forth. And so it was like a drill. And you'd have a 2-on-1 one way, 2-on-1 the other way, a 2-on-1 the other way. So it seemed too much like practice. But the NHL, the speed and creativity on display, and every coach has a different strategy. It's a blast to watch. So I'm on board with move it to 10 minutes. Avoid the shootout if you can. I'm tired of a shootout. I don't. If you have to go that way, fine. But yeah, if you give me 10 minutes of 3-on-3, I bet you 90% of the games, if not more, will get settled in that.
But these are the things, right, that sports, I think, even at the professional level, that they've really got to be a lot more open to embracing. And count me in. I'm a big baseball fan and consider myself a baseball purist, but I love the extra inning rule of putting a guy on second base. It totally changes how you approach that inning. And so, the NFL is talking about it, with overtime, and they're even talking about, how do you handle, because the onside kick is almost always unsuccessful. Do we maybe change that so that it's not an onside kick, but maybe you're 4th and 15, and we actually will give you the ball, and you're 4th and 15. I mean, I think these are things that we got to be a little bit more open and receptive to seeing. Personally, I'd love to see 4th and 15. Would love it.
I think the one thing you have to remain true to is the game, and it can't look gimmicky. Much as you saw a shootout at the beginning of your Carolina League, Harry, it sounded a bit gimmicky.
Yeah,
But nonetheless, I think it's a definite conversation to look into, rewarding the team that wins in 60 instead of 65. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. We did really well. We didn't mention a P word or a C word all show. And we got to congratulate Harry Mahesh.
Thanks, guys. Did I miss something last show or something?
No, we just decided, we were going to do the quiet minute penalty box.
Pandemic. Oh, okay.
That one, yeah. You're in the box. You go, okay. Sean's on the mute. He's done. I'm pulling my around the horn bit. Here he's on. He's got the mute. If I had a point dinger, he'd be dinging points. That's it. I'll put him back on. He's got his 10 seconds. But yeah, good job, everyone. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk hockey finally. I mean, we love looking at these teams, and I'd rather give 45 minutes or 56 minutes of fame to the players and the opportunities they're now creating. And congratulations on getting all of these divisions done. We look forward to getting a bit of an update on the Pacific Division or the BC Division. They're going to be starting up a couple weeks later, so we might talk about them upcoming. It's good news for them, as well as the U.S. Division. Hopefully there's some word of Portland joining the 4 Washington teams. Thanks for joining us here on the Coach's Parlay. For Sean, for Mike, my 2 D-men, and Le Premier Étoile, the first star of tonight's show, the new head coach GM of the Winnipeg Freeze, Harry Mahesh. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Saturdays, every second Saturday at 8 o'clock Central. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the day. And as always, we're bringing more goodness to the greatness. Take care.